What's your "damn, I'm a badass" moment? I have a few moments that make me feel good about myself, but I'm going to talk about this because it happened when I was like 22. And it was one of my first "I'm an adult and I'm not half bad at it" moments. Was driving back really late after hanging out with some friends, like 2 in the morning. It's raining really hard and the roads are dangerously slick. Some guy, well, he less turns than slides onto the road ahead of me, getting up this massive hill with a steep grade, and he isn't controlling his car well. I see him fishtail a couple times but barely regain control, so I back away and slow down. Not sure if he was drunk or just the rain, but I thought to myself, he's gonna lose it. And sure enough, when I round the next corner, there he is in the deep ditch. He was gunning the wheels and spewing mud and grass everywhere. But obviously he couldn't get out like that, and I'm sure his adrenaline was wrecking any chance at slow rational thought because he just went over a tiny cliff. I pulled over, got out in the rain, waving my arms to get him to stop, told him what to do, go as slow as possible, angle the wheels the right way. But I noticed his hand shaking and ended up asking him to get out. I managed to get his car out of the ditch, but when I went to give him back his keys, I see his whole body was visibly shaking from the shock, so I offered to give him a hug. We hugged for what felt like 10 minutes. It was probably just a minute, and he started crying. I assumed just that wave of relief after an adrenaline rush. He wasn't drunk, or wasn't apparent, but he's clearly okay to drive, so when I thought he'd let most of it out, I asked where he lived, which was just up the road a little ways. I checked that his car was okay to drive for a bit, that the radiator wasn't busted, etc. Told him to get in and drove him to his place. Walked him inside and told him not to drive until the next day and to get his undercarriage checked. Walked back to my car in the rain and went home. Last week I drove to a doctor's appointment and saw what seemed like a junkie in a wheelchair hiding under a shirt in pouring rain. He wasn't even trying to get himself out of the rain, just on the side of the road, soaking wet, hiding under his shirt. I was late for the appointment and there were cars close behind me. Plus it was a highly trafficked residential area, so I figured someone else would take care of it. When I left the appointment about an hour later, it was still raining, and the guy was still there. I figured he must be refusing help, but decided I won't be able to sleep that night if I don't check. So I go over, ask him if he would like for me to push him to a spot where he can get out of the rain, and he sobs. "Yes, please. Please get me out of the rain. I'm so cold and I think I broke my foot." Long story short, I'm still heartbroken about it. The depth of desperation in his voice. That he was there, visible to everyone that passed by and no one else thought to stop. I think about him every once in a while. His name was Eric. I hope he's okay. I did what I could, which was cover him in picnic blankets I had in my car, call him an ambulance, and give him a hug. It's amazing to see there are still people like this person. People who go out of their way just to make sure people are okay. That's actually really badass. Story 2. This was kind of weird, but a couple years ago, my wife and I were driving home in the pouring rain from my mom's house. She lived in Stafford, Virginia, and the back roads are super curvy. Sometimes it makes me sick driving it. Anyways, we roll up to a car spun up and the front is torn up. We pull up as we are the only ones there and see another car off to the ditch and side smashed into a tree. It's a pretty deep ditch inside of the road and the guy in the road is freaking out. I get out and instantly get soaked and talk to the guy. He's a young dude and says he didn't see the car and hit them dead on and they went down the side into the trees. I tell him to wait in my car and get my wife to call 911. I look at the car and see the front is smashed and smoking coming out from under the hood. I gulp and say to myself, screw it, I'm about to see the worst sight I've ever seen. I slide down the side and I look and see older people in the car. Luckily they seem alive and alert, but they can't get out as the doors are stuck due to how the car is sitting on the ground and the wheels are destroyed. I have to literally rip the driver door back with the guy inside pushing so I can get him out. He's kind of cut up and dazed. I get him out and he's able to walk. His wife is on the side, her leg is messed up. I have to rip the door open myself as she's out of it. I put all my weight and bent the door back enough to get to her. Her ankle is broken, so I lift and carry her up the embankment into the road. Luckily, the ambulance and police arrive and I'm able to get her to the back. All things considered, it came out better than one would assume. Impressed myself and my wife as I just acted and didn't think. I just ran on instincts. It wasn't really like the movies or anything. No one knew my name or asked for it. Cop didn't give a crap or cared. Ambulance drove off with the couple to the hospital and the young guy that caused the wreck had his mom pick up as the cop wrote him a ticket. Got him his car and left. At that point, I'm just soaking wet with cars trying to get around us. Anyways, it still felt good. Story 3. I saved a life as a 911 dispatcher. My My name is Miss Patient, and I think I've just developed a penicillin allergy. The call started off normal enough. 50s female took penicillin and was now breaking out in hives. As the call went on, she got harder and harder to understand, both because her tongue was swelling and because she was getting more and more confused. I'm in the basement. Will they be able to find me? I don't know if my door's unlocked. I'm gonna go unlock it. No, stay in the basement. I'll tell the paramedics you're down there. They'll find a way to get in. I wrote a note to my partner who was dispatching the ambulances. Patient in basement, door may be locked. Why did you call me? Can I hang up? "You called me, Miss Patient. You're allergic to penicillin. You called 911. The ambulance is on the way." As the paramedics called on scene, I heard a clunk and the tone of a button being pressed. That's not good. About one very long minute later, the paramedic picked up the phone. "It's me. We're here." The crew transported to the hospital. No lights or sirens. Interesting. I was expecting an emergent return. When they got done, the paramedic called me. "If we hadn't known where the patient was, if we would have been 1 minute later, there's a good chance she would have died. Thanks for telling us where to go." Yep, my badass call-taking skills saved a life. 911 dispatchers honestly don't get enough credit. If no one will say it, I would. We appreciate the work you do for everyone. Story 4. Leaving work at a big box store a little after 1 a.m. and I'm next to my car in the parking lot and changing out of my work shirt into a t-shirt. There's a couple benches outside with a few random people around. I see a car swerve toward one woman and then brake hard, and knowing a couple people out there, I figured it was just a very bad joke. But then I see the car lurch forward and brake hard again and can see a woman in the headlights with a terrified look on her face, so I start running as fast as I can toward them. A ridiculously muscled guy gets out of the car and starts moving toward her. I wasn't the first person there. The first was a 14-year-old kid who was very short and skinny. The kid shoves the guy and then the guy knocks him down and gets right on top of him. The guy hits him 3 times before I got there and hit him in the back of the head. This dude was hella drunk and got off the kid to take a couple swings at me that I was able to avoid. One of the others in the crowd yells that the cops have been called and he books it out of there. Thankfully, the cops got him before any more damage happened. He pled guilty and went to jail for a bunch of charges. I don't think I was the most badass because the kid took those hits like a champ and saved the girl, but I still felt pretty awesome. Story 5. My father was denied his military pension back in the 70s when he became old enough to collect it. The government said he'd missed some reserve time and therefore wasn't entitled to retirement. Dad died some 20 years later, never having received a dime of his pension or any medical benefits. Fast forward to about 20 years ago. I started combing through Dad's old naval records and determined that it literally came down to his missing a single 4-hour drill in 1962. I couldn't believe it. He was a World War II combat pilot and had months of extra service in the 40s, but due to the way these things were accounted for back then, those months were rounded down to the next lower whole year. So months of service just tossed away, but a missing 4-hour drill record killed his pension. Seemed fair. Anyway, I gathered records and penned a very detailed and pointed letter to the US Navy and asked them to reconsider. This thing took me weeks to prepare. To my surprise, they did. And even more to my surprise, they agreed with me that Dad was given the rawest of deals, especially considering his service in the Pacific during the war. Some weeks later, I got a retirement certificate signed by the president and a big fat check from the US Treasury for about 20 years' worth of missed retirement checks. Not a physical thing, but that made me feel like a badass for writing such an indignity. It was too late for Dad, but still satisfying. Damn, military pensions at the lowest are over $20,000 a year. And if this dude was a combat pilot in World War II and didn't even retire till the 70s, he definitely does not have the lowest rate. That must be a boatload of money. Thank you for your service. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. How about hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel? Story 6. Back in the day, I trained a few years in judo. A few regional tournaments convinced me that I am a fairly mediocre martial artist. 10 years later, a big athletic guy, outweighed me by probably 80 pounds, took a swing at me outside of a bar. And I threw him with a massive shoulder throw with basically zero effort or thought. I started to lock his elbow in the ground, but realized he was mostly knocked out, so I just stood up. I left as quickly as I could, but I saw like a dozen guys with open mouths saying things like, "Did you see that?" I pulled over to throw up on the way home. A few years later, I related this story to a friend who works in military special operations, including the embarrassing part where I barfed. He said something that I've never forgotten. "That's not a big deal, man. A lot of guys get sick before every big mission. Sometimes you're terrified and you push through it to do badass things anyway." I am in no way, shape, or form anything resembling a badass, but I like my friend's definition of courage. Who cares if you're the cool guy in the movies who walks away from explosions? What matters is if you pulled the girl out of the car before it blew up. Doing what is necessary even if you're scared, especially when done for the benefit of other people, is the real definition of badassery. Story 7. At a concert in between sets, I saw this lady go down. I had just found a seat along the barrier between the pit and general seating. I went up to the girl and her boyfriend and told them I had a seat in the wall if she needed to sit down for a minute. She was pretty out of it, but the boyfriend said that'd be a good idea. We walked her over and flagged down one of the vendors to get her some water since she was really dehydrated. Right about now, the headliner, Rob Zombie, came out on stage and then a huge mosh pit started right in front of us. Myself, the boyfriend, and another guy formed a protective wall around her, myself at the very front because I'm the biggest. Most of the people were respectful and following mosh etiquette. But there was this one drunk dude who I guess saw what we were doing and decided it'd be fun to try and knock me down onto her. He came at me a little harder than everyone else. I just pushed him back in, then he came at me a little harder and I started to get a little angry. The third time he was almost rushing me. I gave him a decent shove and told him, "Come at me like that one more time, you little punk." He did. I saw him coming, and this time I stepped forward into him and shoved my palms into his chest. He stumbled backwards, clear across the other side of the pit, and looked terrified. I shouted, "Try again and I'll knock you the F out, a-hole." He didn't come in our direction again after that. Felt pretty cool protecting that girl and checking that clown. Story 8. I got one of my head professors suspended in my first year of college. I led a complainant party against the head professor who was always harassing and threatening students for no reason. He would accidentally bump into girls and once told a friend of mine, "I'll kick you in the nuts if you don't turn in the assignment, duffer boy." So over the course of a week, we recorded him as I instructed his usual bullying victims to keep the phone in a certain way in their breast pocket. Told them to talk very calmly so they don't get incriminated for misbehavior. After it was all done, we took a confession account on Instagram for added social media pressure and saved them. We took all of it to the head of our department and I put a very smooth yet subtly threatening case in front of him for the students. He promised us to take actions but politely asked to not make anything public. Well, we weren't in a position to negotiate but acted like, no problem, so long as he's removed. 2 days later, we have a new head professor and it's been 17 months since we even saw the bully professor. My vindictive side says you should make it public anyway. Make sure everyone knows that guy should never be in any position like that unless he's cleaned up his act. Story 9. Some guy who used to pick on my brother at work started pestering me online saying my brother was a pansy and doesn't know how to party. So my brother invited me to his work party and I turned up, all 5'6" and kinda scrawny, ready for this dude to try and start on me or my brother. I clocked him across the room and gave him an upward nod, the kind you give to someone you know and feel comfortable around. He avoided eye contact. My brother's buddy said, "Hey, come over with me, I'll introduce you." So I did and he did and the other dude was like, "Hi," all coy-like. I didn't know what to do, so I shook his hand and introduced myself formally. All 5'6" of scrawny me. Dude was like 150% my weight and so sheepish that I felt like a wolf. Turns out everyone wants to posture, nobody wants to step up. Fine by me. Last week, I chucked a piece of cardboard at a recycling bin at work. It was about 30 feet from me. A draft caught it and took it 40 feet up and did a double loop before slamming directly into the bin. One old lady saw and went, "Wow!" Felt like a freaking champion all day. Story 10. Saving a girl's life. I'm not a paramedic or anything, and this happened about 6 years ago. Every summer in Manchester, UK, there's a 10K, 10 kilometers, charity race. Tens of thousands of people turn up in waves to run every year. This particular summer was a hot one. Not a cloud in the sky at about 38 degrees Celsius. Runners were falling all across the route from dehydration and heat exhaustion, so the paramedics had a very busy day. I don't run, but volunteer with my mate and my stepbrother on the home straight giving out bottles of water, etc. to the runners. I just remember there was a guy from the army that ran the race with a small fridge on his back. What a machine. The whole city center is closed off, all the roads are used as the route for the runners. The home straight is a few hundred meters with a 5% gradient hill, then suddenly tails off into a dip, which catches out some runners. Imagine the last stretch of running after all that time. Tired, dehydrated, and maybe a bit lightheaded. A slight hill that suddenly flats out to a dip can knock you off your balance. I've seen some people go straight over and faceplant right into the tarmac. Being too tired, they can't react quickly enough to stop themselves. End up knocking themselves out cold and doing a lot of damage. Plenty of people ran by looking like they crossed the Sahara Desert. It was so hot that day. I saw a woman running towards me looking very faint. She stumbled, off balance. I saw she wasn't going to make it and fall over, maybe face planting straight into the tarmac. So I ran over and caught her just at the moment she was falling. I helped her to the side of the road and got some water. She was barely conscious. She tried to get up and carrying on running. I had to convince her that her race was over. It's a big blow psychologically to fail at such a close distance to the finish, and it's tough for runners to get their head around that. She was losing consciousness quite quickly, so I called out for someone to radio the paramedics. Thankfully, an off-duty nurse was over the road. She saw me holding the girl in my arms and she ran over to help me lay the runner up next to the wall while the paramedics arrived. That was it. She was out cold, and we had to monitor her. The paramedics came with a defibrillator kit ready. They got the pads ready. At that point, I didn't know where to look. This woman I was just holding in my arms was now on the floor. I laugh about it now, but I was a bit worried about her then. The ambulance arrived and they put her on board. She started to stir but was still out of it. I asked to go with them to the hospital, but because I didn't know her, I wasn't allowed. I just thought it would be a good idea if I was there when she woke up, rather than being on her own. The nurse asked if I knew the girl, but I didn't. She said I helped save her life because it could have been a lot worse if she fell and hit her head on the road. I was just in the right place at the right time, I said. This all happened at the end of the race, which was a relief because I needed a strong drink after all that. We went to the pub later on and my brother kept telling everyone what happened and I was a hero. I was feeling pretty good about myself that afternoon, I can tell you. Story 11. I've had one or two, but none compared to my dad's moments. I'll give my top 3 that, no, I don't hear from him because he never ever brags about anything he's done. 3, when I was only 8 or so, he was working in the crawl space under the house and I heard a huge bang. I ran downstairs and saw red everywhere on the floor and from his head. I went into a panic because it was only the two of us home and didn't know what to do, but I will always remember his words. Hey, buddy, don't cry. When you're my age, you just learn to laugh at pain. He then gave me a smile ear to ear and called the ambulance and everything while trying to pretend to gash that, from memory, 28 staples to seal. 2. He and I work in the same industry, but he was running his concrete pump from the second floor. He was moving from room to room and didn't realize the floor wasn't finished. When hopping from one room to another, there was a 15-feet drop. He didn't make the jump and fell on a piece of rebar and he just walked off. He used his truck to pull in front of a caravan that was on fire with its brakes out, stopped the caravan and totaled his Bronco, gets out and pulls 2 kids and a cat out of the back of a flame-engulfed caravan, then just goes home. He was nicknamed Iron Man with a good reason. Lol. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy most badass accidental comebacks ever said. Story 4 is jaw-dropping. See you in that video.